The tide of terror. The holographic display flickered with the dying light of another star system. Captain Maya Singh stood in the dim command center of Luna Base, watching as the blue-tinted ships of the Zephyrian Empire carved through the Altarian defense fleet like sharks through a school of fish. The water-based weapons moved with deadly grace, their hydro cannons slicing through titanium hulls as if they were made of paper. "That's the 7th system this month," whispered Lieutenant Commander Davis, his voice barely audible in the silent room. The 20 officers gathered around the tactical table had seen this scene too many times before. Different planets, different species, but always the same ending. Maya's dark eyes reflected the blue glow of the hologram. At 38, she had already lived through more galactic conflicts than most veteran commanders twice her age. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her uniform bore the scars of countless battles against impossible odds. She had earned her reputation as Earth's most resourceful fleet commander, but even she felt the weight of what they were facing. "The Altarians lasted 3 days longer than we expected," she said quietly. "They had one of the strongest shield technologies in the galaxy. Fat lot of good it did them," muttered Commander Cale Torres from his position near the weapons display. Cale was a stocky man with graying temples and hands that bore the calluses of someone who had built as many weapons as he had fired. He had lost his home colony to the Zephyrians 2 years ago, and the anger still burned in his eyes. Water cuts through everything eventually. The room fell silent as they watched the final moments of the battle. The Zephyrian ships moved with an almost artistic precision, their hulls gleaming with the blue-silver sheen of their water-based armor. These weren't just warships, they were living extensions of their aquatic creators. The Zephyrians had evolved, on a world where water was not just life, but power itself. "Status report on our remaining allies," Maya ordered, turning away from the display. A young officer named Peters stepped forward, his tablet glowing with tactical data. "The Draknari. Empire surrendered yesterday after losing half their fleet. The Crystalline Collective is requesting terms for conditional surrender. The Mechanoid Union..." He paused, swallowing hard. "The Mechanoid Union was completely destroyed 6 hours ago." Maya felt the familiar knot in her stomach tighten. The Mechanoids had been machines, created by an ancient race to be the perfect warriors. If they couldn't stand against the hydro weapons, what hope did anyone have? "What about the other human colonies?" she asked. "Mars base is fortifying. The Jupiter mining stations are evacuating. New Terra is gone." Peter's voice cracked slightly on the last word. New Terra had been humanity's crown jewel, a perfect world with oceans that reminded everyone of Earth. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that it had fallen to an enemy that weaponized water itself. A door hissed open, and Dr. Elena Vasquez entered, the command center. She was a small woman with wild silver hair and eyes that seemed to burn with an inner fire. At 55, she was one of humanity's leading theoretical physicists, and she carried herself with the confident stride of someone who had just solved an impossible equation. "Captain Singh," she said, slightly out of breath from running. "I need to speak with you immediately. It's about the Zephyrian weakness." The room's attention snapped to her like a magnetic field aligning iron filings. For months, scientists across the galaxy had been searching for any vulnerability in the Zephyrian technology. Every species had tried everything: kinetic weapons, energy beams, electromagnetic pulses, even biological warfare. Nothing had worked. "Doctor, we've been through this," Maya said gently. "The hydro weapons adapt to any energy we throw at them. They convert heat into steam shields. They use electromagnetic fields to guide their water streams, and their ships regenerate damage by cycling water through internal systems." Elena smiled, and it was the kind of smile that had historically preceded major scientific breakthroughs. "That's exactly the problem, Captain. Everyone has been trying to fight water with conventional means. But what if we didn't fight the water at all? What if we made it impossible for water to exist in the first place?" She activated her personal holoprojector, and a complex molecular diagram appeared in the air. "I've been studying the Zephyrian technology from the wreckage we recovered after the Battle of Proxima. Their water isn't ordinary H2O. It's been modified at the molecular level to be denser, more cohesive, and more responsive to their neural commands. Commander Torres leaned forward, his tactical mind already working. So their weakness is that it's still water? Exactly, Elena said, her eyes bright with excitement. No matter how they modify it, water has fundamental properties that cannot be changed. It boils at a certain temperature, it ionizes under extreme electrical fields, and most importantly, she paused for dramatic effect. It cannot exist in a true plasma state while maintaining its molecular structure. Maya felt a spark of hope for the first time in months. What are you saying, Doctor? I'm saying that if we can create plasma hot enough and sustained enough, we can break down their modified water at the molecular level. Not just boil it or vaporize it, but actually tear apart the molecular bonds that make it function as a weapon. The implications hit the room like a thunderbolt. Plasma technology wasn't new, but creating the kind of temperatures Elena was talking about required power sources that were usually only found in the cores of stars. The engineering challenges would be enormous, said Engineer Liu Wei, stepping forward from where he had been quietly listening. Liu was a compact man with steady hands and a mind that could visualize complex mechanical systems in 3 dimensions. We're talking about containing stellar-level temperatures inside a ship hull. The power requirements alone are within the range of our latest fusion cores, Elena interrupted. I've already run the calculations. We'd need a completely new ship design, something built around the plasma generation system, rather than having it as an add-on weapon. Maya looked around the room at her officers. These weren't just military personnel. They were the last hope of dozens of species that had already fallen to the Zephyrian tide. The weight of that responsibility sat heavily on all their shoulders. How long would it take to build such a ship? She asked. Liu's brow furrowed as he ran mental calculations. With our current manufacturing capabilities working around the clock, 8 months minimum. That's assuming we can solve the containment problems and find materials that can withstand the internal temperatures. We don't have 8 months, Torres said grimly. Intelligence reports suggest the Zephyrians are massing their main fleet for a push toward the inner systems. They'll reach Earth in 6 weeks. The room fell silent again. 6 weeks to accomplish what seemed impossible, or watch humanity join the long list of species that had fallen to the hydro weapons. Maya walked to the large viewport that dominated one wall of the command center. Beyond the reinforced glass, she could see the construction yards of Luna Base, where human engineers and workers labored to build the ships that defended their species. Most of those ships would be swept aside like leaves in a hurricane when the Zephyrians arrived. Dr. Vasquez, she said without turning around, what would you need to make this work? Elena stepped forward, her scientific mind already organizing the impossible into the merely improbable. I'd need a team of the best engineers we have, access to our most advanced manufacturing facilities, and enough resources to essentially invent a new form of space combat. You'd also need test pilots crazy enough to fly an untested ship powered by controlled stellar fire, added pilot Sarah Mitchell from the back of the room. Sarah was one of humanity's ace pilots, a woman who had earned the nickname Storm for her ability to fly through impossible situations and emerge victorious. Her short red hair framed a face marked by the concentration lines of someone who had made split-second, life-or-death decisions in the cockpit. Maya turned back to face the room. In the faces of her officers, she saw the same determination that had carried humanity through every crisis in their history. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had never been defeated. It was exactly the kind of situation where humans historically did their best work. Then we're going to build the impossible, she announced. Dr. Vasquez, you have unlimited resources and complete authority over the project. Liu, Torres, I want you working with her on the engineering challenges. Sarah, start training pilots for a ship that doesn't exist yet, flying combat maneuvers that have never been tested. She paused, looking each of them in the eye. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to build a ship that turns water into weakness and plasma into victory. The Zephyrians think their hydro weapons make them invincible. Let's show them what happens when they face the fury of human innovation. The officers dispersed with new purpose, their footsteps echoing through the corridors of Luna Base as they rushed to begin the impossible task. Maya remained at the viewport watching the stars that held both their enemy and their hope. In 6 weeks, they would either achieve the greatest military breakthrough in galactic history or die in the attempt. For humanity, those had always been acceptable odds. The war against water was about to meet the fire of human determination, and the galaxy would never be the same. Fire meets water 5 weeks and 6 days after the impossible project began, Captain Maya Singh stood on the bridge of humanity's most dangerous creation. The ship around her hummed with barely contained stellar fire, its hull plates glowing faintly from the enormous energies coursing through its systems. They had named it the Phoenix Rising, and like its mythological namesake, it had been born from the ashes of defeat and desperation. The ship looked nothing like any vessel in human space. Where traditional ships were sleek and efficient, the Phoenix Rising was a study in controlled chaos. Massive heat dissipation vanes stretched from its hull like the wings of some metallic bird of prey. The core section glowed with the orange-red light of contained plasma, visible through specially designed viewing ports that allowed the crew to monitor the heart of their weapon. "Final systems check?" Maya announced, her voice carrying through the bridge with calm authority despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her science station, her silver hair now streaked with the gray of 5 weeks of 18-hour days. Plasma core is stable at 15 million degrees Celsius. Containment fields are holding at 98.7% efficiency. All molecular disintegration arrays are online and calibrated. Engineer Liu Wei nodded from his position at the engineering console. Hull integrity is optimal. Heat management systems are functioning within acceptable parameters. The ship is as ready as we can make it with the time we had. Commander Cale Torres stood at the weapon station, his hands resting on controls that had never been tested in actual combat. Plasma cannon arrays are charged and ready. Point defense systems are online. If we're going to do this insane thing, at least we'll do it with maximum firepower. Pilot Sarah Mitchell sat at the helm, her fingers dancing over the flight controls, with the practiced ease of someone who had spent decades learning to fly the impossible. Engines are responding beautifully. This ship handles like a dream, assuming your dream involves flying a controlled star through space. Maya allowed herself a small smile. In the 6 weeks since Dr. Vasquez had proposed her radical solution, her team had accomplished what every expert had said was impossible. They had built a ship that weaponized the fundamental forces of stellar physics and made it spaceworthy. The engineering challenges had been staggering, but human ingenuity had found solutions to problems that had never existed before. The communications officer suddenly straightened at his station. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from Luna Base Command." "Put it through," Maya ordered. Admiral Chen's weathered face appeared on the main screen. The commander of human space forces looked like he had aged a decade in the past month. "Captain Singh, our deep space sensors have detected the Zephyrian main fleet. They're 3 hours out from Earth's outer defense perimeter." Maya felt her stomach tighten. They had hoped for more time to test their systems, to run combat simulations, to train with their revolutionary technology, but the galaxy rarely provided the luxury of perfect timing. "What's the fleet composition, Admiral?" 47 capital ships, including their flagship, the Tide of Dominion. That's Admiral Hydros commanding personally. Intelligence suggests he's bringing enough firepower to glass every human world in a single engagement. Commander Torres cursed under his breath. Admiral Hydros was a legend among the Zephyrians, a tactical genius who had personally conquered over 100 star systems. His flagship was said to carry hydro weapons powerful enough to split moons. "Admiral," Maya said, "we're launching immediately. Have all remaining human ships fall back to defensive positions around Earth. Do not engage the Zephyrian fleet until we arrive." Chen's expression was grim but proud. "Maya, you know the odds you're facing. One experimental ship against the most powerful fleet in galactic history." "Those odds look pretty good to me, sir," Maya replied with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "We've been outnumbered before." The transmission ended, and Maya turned to address her crew. Around the bridge, 37 of humanity's finest officers and specialists prepared for what could be the most important battle in their species' history. All hands. This is the captain, she announced over the ship's communication system. In 3 hours we will engage the Zephyrian main fleet in battle. They have conquered half the galaxy with weapons that have never been defeated. They believe themselves invincible. She paused, looking out at the stars that held both their enemy and their destiny. Today, we teach them that they picked the wrong species to threaten. Today we show the galaxy what happens when human fire meets alien water. All stations, prepare for immediate departure. The Phoenix Rising turned toward the approaching enemy. Its plasma core, burning brighter as systems, came to full power. Behind them, Luna Base watched their only hope disappear into the darkness between stars. 2 hours later, they made contact with the edge of the Zephyrian fleet. Sarah brought the ship out of hyperspace in a brilliant flash of displaced energy, and immediately the tactical displays filled with enemy contacts. "Sweet mother of space," whispered the sensor officer. "I count 49 ships, not 47. They picked up reinforcements." Maya studied the tactical display with the eye of someone who had spent her career finding ways to win impossible battles. The Zephyrian fleet was arrayed in a classic domination formation, with their capital ships forming a wall of firepower, while smaller vessels prepared to exploit any weakness in their opponent's formation. "Dr. Vasquez, what's our effective range? With the plasma weapons?" Elena consulted her instruments. "Theoretical maximum range is 50,000 kilometers. Practical combat range for molecular disruption is approximately 30,000 kilometers. And their hydro weapons? Intelligence suggests a maximum effective range of 75,000 kilometers for their capital ships." Torres shook his head. "So they can hit us before we can hit them? Perfect." Maya smiled, and it was the kind of smile that had historically preceded some of humanity's greatest military victories. "That assumes their weapons work on us the same way they work on everyone else. Sarah, take us in fast and close. Let's see what happens when they try to use water against a ship powered by stellar fire." The Phoenix Rising accelerated toward the enemy fleet with a speed that surprised even its own crew. The plasma drive system Elena had designed didn't just propel the ship, it turned physics itself into a weapon. At 60,000 kilometers, the Zephyrian fleet opened fire. Streams of weaponized water, pressurized to incredible density and moving at relativistic speeds, lanced out toward the approaching human ship. These were the weapons that had cut through every defense the galaxy could muster. "Impact in 30 seconds, reported the tactical officer. "All power to the hull heating system," Maya ordered. "Elena, activate the molecular disruption field." The Phoenix Rising's hull began to glow white-hot as the plasma core channeled energy directly into the ship's armor. Temperature readings climbed past the boiling point of water, past the vaporization point, into ranges where matter itself began to break down at the molecular level. The Zephyrian hydro weapons struck the human ship like the fist of an angry god. On any other vessel, the attack would have been instantly fatal, but as the weaponized water met the Phoenix Rising's superheated hull, something unprecedented happened. The water didn't just boil or vaporize. The molecular bonds that held it together were torn apart by the extreme temperatures, breaking down into component atoms that dispersed harmlessly into space. The Zephyrians' most powerful weapons simply ceased to exist upon contact with the human ship. "Direct hit," reported Torres, his voice filled with amazed excitement. "No damage to ship systems. Their weapons are completely ineffective against our hull heating system." A cheer went up from the bridge crew, but Maya kept her focus on the tactical display. The real test was still coming. "Return fire," she ordered. "All plasma cannons target their lead capital ship." The Phoenix Rising unleashed its fury for the first time in combat. Beams of contained stellar plasma, hotter than the surface of most stars, reached out across space toward the Zephyrian fleet. Where they struck, the enemy ship's water-based armor simply vanished, molecular bonds severing under temperatures. That matter was never meant to endure. The lead Zephyrian ship, a massive dreadnought that had destroyed entire worlds, began to come apart as its water-based systems failed catastrophically. Internal cooling systems boiled away, Structural water that provided hull integrity evaporated instantly, and the ship's own weapons turned against it as their containment systems failed. One enemy capital ship destroyed, Torres reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "Captain, we actually did it. The plasma weapons work exactly as designed." But their celebration was premature. The Zephyrian fleet, commanded by one of the galaxy's greatest tactical minds, was already adapting to this new threat. Hydros's expression shifted to something that might have been respect, or perhaps simply the acknowledgement of a worthy enemy. "Then we end this as warriors should, ship to ship, commander to commander." The communication ended, and the two flagships began their approach. Around them, the combined fleet of liberated species engaged the remaining Zephyrian ships in a battle that would be remembered for generations. "Sarah, bring us about for a direct assault on their flagship," Maya ordered. "Elena, I need everything you can give me from the plasma core. Torres, prepare all weapons for sustained fire." The Phoenix Rising and the Tide of Dominion closed with each other like ancient gladiators entering the arena. The Zephyrian flagship unleashed its full arsenal, streams of weaponized water powerful enough to carve continents, striking the human ship from every angle. But the Phoenix Rising had been built for exactly this moment. Its hull blazed with temperatures that turned the vacuum of space itself into a weapon, and every drop of water that touched it was torn apart at the molecular level. The human ship's return fire was devastating. Plasma beams designed to disrupt the fundamental forces that held water together struck the Zephyrian flagship like the judgment of an angry star. Sections of the massive ship began to fail as their water-based systems collapsed under the assault. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, the Tide of Dominion was drifting powerless in space, its weapons silent, and its commander requesting terms for surrender. Maya stood on the bridge of the Phoenix Rising, looking out at a battlefield where the impossible had become reality. The Zephyrian fleet, which had conquered half the galaxy, was surrendering to a coalition of species that had rediscovered their courage. "Captain," Dr. Vasquez said quietly, "we did it. We actually did it." Maya nodded, but her mind was already moving beyond the victory to what came next. "Elena, how quickly can we replicate the plasma technology for other ships?" "With the industrial capacity of the Alliance, we could have a fleet of Phoenix-class vessels within 6 months," Elena replied. "The Zephyrians won't be able to threaten anyone ever again." As news of the victory spread across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for decades began to hope again. The hydro weapons that had seemed invincible had met their match in human ingenuity and determination. Maya looked out at the stars, knowing that humanity had just changed the course of galactic history. They had taken an enemy's greatest strength and turned it into weakness through the simple application of physics and the refusal to accept defeat. The age of Zephyrian dominance was over. The age of the Phoenix had begun.